Welcome to the Wing Life Podcast, where we talk about wing foiling and the lifestyles of those who enjoy this great sport. All right, sir. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
How was the
It was an exhausting trip.
I was going to ask you that. How was that?
Yeah, the flight home was okay. The day after I got home, I got this ear chopped, and they cut down here, and they took they made a big ellipse, and then they took a circle of skin, and they cut into here, and they were going to do a skin graft up to there, but then they found that the skin cancer had gone into the cartilage as well, maybe. So They cut a whole pile of cartilage away, and it sort of got way more involved than they imagined. And last week it was taped up from here all the way around,
Oh, wow.
So it's like the day after, I was like, yeah, that's not going to work.
Maybe not.
Can't do that one. Yeah.
It's best to wait a little bit. How's it feeling now?
It's a bit sore because of the skin graft thing, and they sew that circle onto it, and then they sew a circle of foam on top, and that squishes the skin down so that it, joins up and grows onto part of your whatever.
Okay.
We'll see. I've had lots of other ones. I've had one cut out of the top of here, and I've had another one cut behind my ear and off my hand, and it's just ongoing, really.
Is that just based on family history, or is that just?
Well,
I think my aunt got that.
I had red hair, and when I was a kid, it was normal to have a scab on your nose and scab on your ears. You were just burnt to bits. Wearing a hat and sunscreen just wasn't really a thing.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, how did AWSI turn out for you guys?
It was really good. It was actually, I think it was a quieter show than normal, but it was actually still pretty good. I've just realised I've got the AC going next to me here, so I'll find the app for that and turn that off, make it a bit quieter.
Okay. So you found it a bit quieter than previous years for the AWSI?
Yeah, I think so. I think perhaps less shops were coming over for it than normal. A lot of people interested in the stuff, and it was great to talk to everyone again. And it's always a good show to go to, but I think it was a little quieter than normal.
How many years have you been going?
Well, I used to do one on the East Coast down in Florida. It was called Surf Expo, and I think I did that for 25 years.
Whoa. Okay.
And I've done quite a few AWSI shows as well.
That's pretty cool. So, yeah,
way
just
too
getting
many.
been in this for a little while then, haven't you?
Yeah.
How'd you get into Axis? How'd the whole company start?
You want Axis or you want the beginning?
I want the beginning. Yep.
Okay. I guess it started. I grew up in Rothsay Bay, which is not far from where I live now, and we had, I had a little sailing boat, and I learned to sail, and I was down the beach every day. That's what we did. We were down the beach, and then windsurfing was sort of started and invented. And my friends got windsurfers, and I wanted one, and my parents wouldn't buy me one, but they helped me build one, and I built it at home, and I built it out of polystyrene with a plywood laminate on the outside, and I actually built the mast, and I built the sail, and all the various bits and pieces of it, and put it together, and made my first windsurfer.
Oh, nice.
With the help of my mother. She helped a lot. I think my parents had big plans of me going to university and doing marine biology or something, but I got so into manufacturing and building things that I just ended up doing that. I built a few windsurfers, and I ended up getting sponsored by a company just down the road, and that was called Windtoys Hawaii. It was a New Zealand branch of the Hawaii one. And
cool.
They taught me how to laminate, and I built boards for them for quite a few years. And then I think when I was about 19 or 20, I moved to Hawaii, and I actually worked for Windsurfing Hawaii in Oahu in Kailua Bay. and then everyone kept coming back and saying how windy it was in Maui. So ended up going to Maui, and I got a job laminating for Jimmy Lewis, who was he had the Sailboards Maui factory up Baldwin Ave in Paia, and it was a business that was run by Fred Hayward and Mike Walsh. So it was the early speed sailing days, and early days. Mike Walsh was one of the pioneers of actually windsurfing on Maui. So early days on Maui, which was great fun. And I worked I came back and forwards to New Zealand, Hawaii for many years. And in New Zealand, I started my own brand called Sailboards Underground, which later just became Underground when I was building kiteboards. I carried on building boards during that whole time. And then towards the end of that, kite surfing started, and I did underground kiteboards and built those in Christchurch in New Zealand, and we exported them all around the world. And that was a very busy time. And kind of at the peak of that, I think I had 15 guys working for underground, and then had a fire one Sunday morning, and it burnt the whole lot to the ground. So I lost the retail store, the factory, everything. So I had to try and get that up and running again, and that was kind of a huge effort. And by the end of that, it was getting more difficult to export from New Zealand. The exchange rates were changing, and it wasn't really. It needed to move to China, but I just, I was a little burned out at the time. So I sold the business to China, and I worked for the company that bought my business, and we set up manufacturing in China to supply for the world in twin tips. And they used our technology that we'd worked out to build boards for lots of other companies. So,
no way!
In the underground days, we were one of the first to use. I think we were the first to use Polonia wood core, which is now the absolute standard for all kiteboards. So, moved that all off to China and worked for that. And then the very first guy to buy an underground kiteboard in the US was Evan, my partner in Axis. And when I sold to China, he became the distributor for underground in the US, North America, South America. And then when underground collapsed, Evan basically said, "Look, it's too good. We need to start it again." So we came up with the name Axis and started Axis. And Axis was primarily kiteboards at the time, but Evan got mad keen on foiling. He got me into kite foiling, and then we did stand-up paddleboard foiling and foiling, and kind of went on from there. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's a pretty cool origin story.
Yeah.
Huh. Like what year was that then?
Version of it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Which part?
All of it. All of it.
I think I went to Maui in about 84, something like that.
Okay.
And I forget dates now. I'm 59 now, and I started windsurfing when I was about probably 15, and I've been building boards and bits and pieces ever since then.
Oh wow! So you lived in Maui for a while. How was it windsurfing there? Did you get to sail a bunch of different spots?
Had 8 years there. Well, Maui's pretty. There is just the North Shore mainly, and I rode a lot of the North Shore. I did some winters there as well. The winters are actually more fun when the big swell comes through. The wind's not as reliable, but the swell is just magic. And had some massive days there that are very, very memorable. We'll never forget that. I did a lot more surfing back then as well.
Oh, did you? Okay. Did you grow up surfing?
I learned to surf when I was a kid. I can't ever say that I'm a brilliant surfer, but I've done a lot of surfing, and I can surf okay. Yeah.
Fair enough. So then Axis kind of takes off. It's making boards at the start. It morphs a little bit then into foils as well, because you had started kite foiling. So you're like, what the heck? We might as well start making these.
Well, we did kite foiling, and then we actually built some surfboards, and we built stand-up paddle boards. I guess, our focus was kiteboards to start with, but it just slowly turned into into foiling over time, and it became more and more just foiling. And I actually remember a time, I was saying to Evan, I've got Axis kiteboarding and we're selling foiling gear there. I think we actually need Axis foiling as a website, and it was quite a conscious decision that we're transitioning over to more foiling than kiteboarding.
Okay. And then foiling has a lot of technology in there and a lot of knowledge and whatnot that has to get acquired and put together. Like, how did all that knowledge, was that built up over the years of working? And then
It was, but I think one of the biggest things is when we started doing foiling, there was a lot of other people building foils, and there was a foiling community there. And I sort of said, well, why is, for example, the front wing and the fuselage, most of the ones I looked at, the front wing was the same angle as the fuselage on 0 degrees. But it seemed to me, looking into it, that, most front wings were actually running at an angle of attack. And the optimum for most foil sections seemed to be about 1 to 2 degrees. So I said, why don't we put the front wing on an angle to the fuselage, so that the fuselage is running like an arrow rather than running at 2 degrees through the water? And sort of no one really had an answer for that or had thought about that. So there's a lot of things with foiling that we, instead of just doing the same old, we asked questions and found out. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've done quite well with it, is because we've kept asking. We've never really done any copying. We're more trying to find out how things work. Like when we first started, we decided that the front wing, and you have your fuselage and your back wing, we thought it would be the best thing to put the mast directly on top of the front wing. From an engineering point of view, it would be stronger to do it that way. So, we designed that and built that, and it actually foiled fine, but it didn't really want to turn. So as part of the control for that, we thought it was actually something wrong with the wing, but we built a fuselage with the mast mounted further back, and test rode that, and it fixed everything straight away. And that, and instead of just going, okay, we'll just do it there, we said, okay, let's do a test. And we did a whole bunch of fuselage with the mast in different positions, and actually found out what that did and why. And I think we did a lot of investigation and working out rather than just doing the same old. And in the long run, I think that gives you a better understanding of why things are. And if you have a better understanding, you have a better idea of how to actually take it forward.
Yeah, because your company has a lot of, like, compared to other ones, you have a lot of foils, you got a lot of, I guess, different categories of foils. And I find that kind of fascinating as to how all that came to be.
Well, it's not really just a small, medium, large sport, and I think with Axis you can start. We have our SES kits, which is a beginner kit. We have the larger BSC, which are ideal for learning to wing. And as you get into it, you can just slowly morph your way into whatever you want to do in foiling. And a lot of people at the upper end of it, like if you're looking at high performance winging, high performance downwinding, surfing, there isn't a one setup that this is what you have to have. And, we kind of guide people and say, this setup works pretty good for surfing, for example. And then people go out and test it themselves, and they might find a slightly shorter fuselage or slightly bigger rear wing or smaller rear wing, and they find their own magic balance setup, and it's suited exactly for them. I think a lot of people really enjoy that process and doing that. It's not really a situation where people just want to buy small, medium, or large and just go to it. Part of the magic is finding that balance, finding your magic setup.
So you can customize a little bit more then in this
way. Completely. Yeah. Forever customizing. We do have a lot of wings, but really, if you sort of sift through it, if you understand the Axis range, it's a reasonably logical process to decide what would work best for you and why. Okay. And it will narrow down to not that many choices. But it does look a bit daunting if you just look at the range and go, okay, where do I start?
Well, how would somebody new start with Axis then?
depends on the sport that they're getting into. But for example, if you're getting into winging, I said before about the BSC. I think for most people, a 970 or a 1060 BSC with a short red fuselage and a 400 original rear wing or a 440 original rear wing and a 75 aluminium mast, you can't get better than that for learning on. And
Right.
I think foiling is a journey, and I think it shouldn't be rushed. I think too many people try and rush to some imaginary finish line. You're supposed to be enjoying it all the way through. So, when you learn, it needs to be stuff that's easy to learn on and easy to progress on. And, as you'll know when you're grown out of it and ready for the next step, but there's no rush. Enjoy your journey. It is a journey.
That's true. Yeah, especially with the start of it is a very steep climb, and then a little bit, and then you'll plateau a bit, and then as soon as you get to that magic phase, you can do so many things with this new tool, which I find is pretty fascinating.
Yep. We often have that with a new wing. Like we'll introduce a new wing. I think back to a wing that we did years and years ago, and it was one of our most biggest selling wings we've ever had. It was a 900 span wing, and it was designed for windsurfing. But it was quite high aspect at the time, and it really changed everything. I mean, that became the wing that everyone used for winging, for surfing, for prone, for everything. It was an amazing wing. So you kind of design it for one thing, and who knows what it might become. So I'm mindful of that too when we design a new wing, and people say, "What it's for?" And I say, "Well, we've used it for this. We've used it for this. It does great for that." But there isn't a boundary on where it might end up being.
Yeah, fair enough. You kind of put it out there and see. Did you release some new gear at AWSI this year, right?
Yeah, we released some smaller pro wings. So we already had the 1201 out already, and that had been out for a while. That's actually become our biggest selling wing ever, which is kind of surprising because it's a massive wing, and kind of almost thought it might be a bit of a fringe thing, but the market for that sort of wing is massive. So we sold a lot of that, and we've been working for quite a few years on smaller versions of that. So we did the 1121, 1051, 1001, and 951. The 951 is the one that Edo was riding in the M20, and Kailini also. So that's a very, very fast competition downwinding wing, but it actually it's pretty good for prone surfing. It's kind of like a sped up speed type surfing. It's not what you'd normally imagine, but it does actually work. It turns beautifully, so it's still nice for surfing, and it's great for winging. So it's actually quite a multi-purpose wing. We also had the Spitfire that we released a while back, and that has been just a massive turning point. It's been really, really popular, and it's been really amazing to have a proper, really good surfing wing in our range. And we added at AWSI a 720 version of it, a slightly smaller one.
Because that one actually looks like a Spitfire. The shape of it is slightly different compared to other brands. Can you how does that in relation to let's say one that has more tips on it or that kind of thing? What is that difference?
So if we go back to the ART, I should actually have some wind flying around, really. I don't know if I have. If you think back to our ART wing, that was kind of one of the first early, quite high aspect wings. And it was fairly straight across, but it did have some sweep in the outline. And that was about 2 years ago, and as soon as we released that, we decided to start working on the next thing. And the very first wing that we did, it was also 999 span, but we called it a 999 skinny, and it was less chord. So we narrowed the chord by 10 millimeters, and the thickest point of the wing, we made it a dead straight line side to side. Maybe I can find a wing.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, actually. Oh, we got Siri talking to us. There it is.
I don't know. That was from... That's a Spitfire. Go away, watch. So the thickest point of this wing is a dead straight line. So if you drew a straight line side to side, it doesn't have any sweep in the outline. So the Spitfires actually came out of that first wing, that 999 skinny that I was telling you about. That was a straight median line. As soon as we did that wing, it was amazing for turning. And it was, dead straight across. It's not what you would imagine a surfing wing would be. So we developed the Art Pro. I think we did. I don't know. It just went on for 2 years. All sorts of different prototypes and testing to develop the Art Pro. With the Art Pro, the tip is so narrow that we ended up putting it was actually an elliptical outline, same as the Spitfire, but we ended up putting a squarer tip on it. We added a bit of material at the tip. And the reason we did that is that if you make the wing tip like on a very, very high aspect wing, that wing tip is so fine that the end of it ends up just being drag. It doesn't actually create lift or any benefit at all. So we just sort of cut it off and added a squarer tip to it. And that wing, all of the prototypes we did on the Art Pro, they all turned beautifully, but they were fast and really great for winging and, great for downwind and all of that. And at the same time as that, we did quite a few attempts at a really, really good prone wing. And we tried all sorts of different things, and nothing was absolutely groundbreaking and fantastic. And then as a last minute thing, we said, well, why don't we just do a lower aspect version of the Art Pro? I mean, it turns so beautifully. And the Art Pro, it had, very little turn down in the tip, which meant that when you popped the tip out, it breached really nicely. It was predictable and nice turning. So we basically just scaled up the chord, so made a wider chord. And because of the shape of this wing with the wider chord, it didn't really need the tip cutting off. So we just left it kind of elliptical. With all your wings, you're really trying to get an elliptical loading when you draw the wing. And, it was what it was. So we just left it exactly like that. And it looked the same as a Spitfire, so we called it a Spitfire. It wasn't actually designed intentionally to be like a Spitfire. It's just how it ended up. I guess the point of all of that is that the Spitfire and the Art Pro, they're kind of exactly the same wing. It's the same foil section. It's the same straight median line, same elliptical outline, except that the tip's been squared off a little bit on the Art Pro. But apart from that, it is the very same wing, and they do feel very similar to ride. But obviously with a lot more chord on the Spitfire, it's very, very easy and very forgiving and fun to ride.
So what does the sweep do compared to, like, if that one's a straight median line compared to some of them that sweep down a little bit more? What difference does that make?
The sweep that I'm talking about is more the wing sweeping back in its outline.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So when we first started doing wings, they were swept right back. They were curved back. And the idea was that you kind of had to have that to make things turn. That's what everybody thought. Sweep was important to have a wing to turn. But as we went more and more straight median line, they just became more predictable and more precise in their turning. And so we've ended up doing all of our wings like that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So the turn down on that is how much it turns down from the center of the wing. And you can see there's not a lot of turn down in that wing. We used to have, a lot of turn down in the wing tips. And with every wing, you get a lift vector, and the lift vector is at 90 degrees to wherever it is in the wing. So you can imagine, exaggerated, if you had a lot of turn down on the tip, the vector would be like this in the tip, which is kind of okay if both tips are in the water. You've got an equal and opposite force there. But if you pop one tip out, suddenly it's completely unbalanced and the whole thing crashes.
Oh, that's why.
With this one, everything's kind of more or less the same plane. So when the tip pops out, it just carries on going. It doesn't seem to make any difference at all.
Okay, yeah, I was curious about that. Why some wings now are able to do that more, because some of them before, they would, as soon as you got any part of it out of the water, it would be a big crash.
Quite a few of them sort of turn down a little bit and then almost turn up again at the ends. And what they're trying to do with that is so that when it pops out of the water, it's again, that force is not unbalanced because there's not a great outwards force there. But we did some test wings like that, and it just complicates things because you've got more vectors going different directions. So that's why that wing is, essentially it's pretty flat, just with a little bit of curve in it. And the little bit of curve just allows it to roll from side to side nicely.
Oh, that's all you need.
Seems pretty good.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's a really simple wing, that you look at it and there's probably not much to it, but it works really, really nicely.
Okay. And then do you recommend, I guess you would recommend certain fuse lengths or tail wings or mast lengths and everything. But the nice thing about AWSI is you can customize absolutely everything. So they'll try something and then they'll just be able to, as the more and more they progress, they can just tweak it even more and more and more.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd say the naming conventions, we've had short, ultra short, crazy short, silly short. Probably a bit confusing for some people. I would say most people when they're learning, like on a BSc, short fuselage, that short length, 680 millimeters is a good length to start on. And it's predictable and easy to use. That number, 680 on a red fuselage, is just the actual length of the piece of aluminium, which kind of nothing to do with anything. I mean, how long is the fuselage? Where do you measure from? Do you measure from the center of the front wing to the center of the rear wing, or do you measure from the front edge to the back edge, or to the middle to the middle? There isn't really a measuring standard, so it's a little bit hard to compare one to another. Okay. Generally speaking, though, the red fuselage on short is great for beginners, and then on the black fuselage, the ultra short is by far the most popular, and that's good for most people. Shorten that actually makes it much looser for tuning. The length of your fuselage and the size of your rear wing give you your stability. So if you've got a longer fuselage and a bigger rear wing, it's much more stable. And if you have a shorter fuselage with a smaller rear, it's much more loose and quicker turning. But all of that is a preset bolt together. And then the problem happens when you go faster and faster and faster, and that fuselage rear wing, that lever arm, just carries on creating more and more and more lift until you can't hold it down with your front foot. So the new skinny rear wings that we've come out with, they pair particularly well with the Pro and also with the Spitfires for winging because you're moving faster. If you're more surfing on the Spitfires, the original progressives are better, but we've actually sized down a lot. A lot of guys now using the 300, the 275, and even the 250, which was kind of considered too small before.
Now, is your sizing, because you're saying numbers, and there's some of them that use, like your sizing is different, correct, from other companies?
I don't know. Okay. That's our sizing there.
There we go.
And
okay.
That's an 840 Spitfire, and the first number that we mention is the wingspan.
Okay, and then you have your chord there. 40.
Yep, and then do a mean average chord.
A mean average chord.
That's a really important number. So the mean average chord is the average of your whole entire wing. So there'll be a maximum chord there, and then it tapers towards the tip. But what's the average chord of the whole entire wing? So the average chord and the span gives you a good idea of what the wing is. Truth is that no one number tells you everything, but I think that describing your wing purely by area is a bit misleading, because we have wings that are ridiculously small in area and are not that hard to get up because the span's quite great. So, we've always used span as our description for the size.
Okay.
I guess a lot of other companies have used area, which I think is misleading. It doesn't give you a good idea to compare.
So you have to take in span, chord. Do you have to take in the thickness as well of the?
There's a lot of variables, like in each and every wing. Like if I'm trying to look at a wing and trying to compare it, I look at the span, and then I probably look at the mean average chord, And then I try and look at the foil section, what the foil section is. And I know that the foil section on the Spitfire, and it varies a little bit on some of the Art Pros as well, but it has a thickness percentage. So if you take a 100 mils cord, so the cord's 100 mils, on the 1201, it's actually a 12.1% thickness. So it's the thickest point is 12.1 millimeters. On the 1001 Pro, it's actually a 10.5% foil section. So at 100 mils, it's only 10.5% thick. So you've got your thickness of your foil, and not necessarily a massive guideline. You can actually have a foil that's a thicker percentage, but a different foil section, and it'll actually be less drag than a thinner one. So you can't automatically assume just because it's thinner that it's going to be faster, but it is a bit of a generalization. Every foil section has a camber as well. So if you look at the foil section from the side, it has a top section and it has a bottom section. And the camber is an invisible line that is halfway between both those two lines. And that's compared to a dead straight line, a chord line, and that's described as a percentage. So, for example, that the Spitfire and the ART Pros and the ART, they're a 2.5% camber. So that means if it was 100 mils of cord, and you've got your chord line, which is a dead straight line, and you've got your camber line, that's got 2.5 mils of camber in it. And the more camber a wing has, the more curved, the more bent it is in the foil section, the more that creates lift. So the P&G foil section, for example, is a 3.5% camber. Very, very high lift at lower speeds. But it's not very fast. It doesn't want to go fast. And if you get it to its upper limit, it just kind of hits a wall and won't go any faster.
It just stalls out.
The Mast, for example, is a 0% camber. It's symmetrical. And the rear wing is a 1% camber, and that's actually pointed downwards, so the thickest part's on the bottom.
Oh, okay. So then, and what are the shims then come into play? Because you were saying that there's a slight, the front wing is a different angle of attack, right?
So the whole key with shims is that all you really need to do with shims is compare the angle of the front wing to the angle of the back wing, and that's it. That's the most important thing. So the Art Pros, the Spitfires, most of our higher performing wings, the BSC is a little bit different, but let's take most of our high performing wings. They have generally a 1 degree angle of attack on the front wing. So the front wing is angled up 1 degree. The rear wing at the back is actually angled down, and that on all of the skinnies and the progressives, that's 1.5 degrees angled down. So if you just bolt any of those Spitfire Art Pros onto the front and just bolt any of the skinnies or progressives onto the back, you've got 1 up, 1.5 down. So the difference between the two is 2.5 degrees. That's the important number. So if you're angling your rear wing further down, that's increasing the difference between the two. That's why it's described as positive shimming. If you're reducing the angle on your rear, that's called negative shimming because it makes the difference between them less than what it was originally. So positive shimming, angling the rear wing further down, actually gives you more front foot pressure. With any wing, you're basically riding your front wing. So your front foot and your back foot is sort of balanced on that front wing. But if you didn't have a rear wing, or you have a very small rear wing, it gets very pitch sensitive and very hard to balance on. So the length of the fuselage and the rear wing gives you that balance so that you can stay on it. But it sort of also relates back to what size wing you're using and how heavy you are. So if you're a bigger rider, you can benefit from having a little bit more positive shimming on the back to give you that front foot pressure balance. If you're a really lightweight rider, you'll find it hard to hold the wing down, and actually negative shimming it will make it more comfortable and easier for you. Until now, we sort of have tried to stay away from shims because a lot of people just completely confuse themselves and ruin everything in the balance by sticking shims in there, not knowing what they're doing, describing it as a colour or something like that. I think it's more important to understand what the shims are doing and place it in there to correct what you're feeling, rather than just trying a different colour to see what it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
Makes sense to me.
it's a pretty confusing. Yeah, most people don't know what it does. They'll have a bunch of different stuff and they kind of just piece it together. So, or the shop pieces it together for them. Yeah.
Yep. Generally, most of our foils, they're set for most riders just to bolt the wings on and go to it.
Okay.
No problem at all. But as you get to that upper limit and you're really just refining your setup, the tiny little differences make quite a big difference. And the new shim kit that we've got, it has a quarter, a half, and a 1 degree shim plus, and also a quarter, half, and 1 degree minus, 6 shims in the kit. And they're stackable, so you can put the quarter and half together to get 3/4 plus or minus. And you can go 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, etc. So, if you want just a tiny bit more front foot pressure, a quarter degree plus on the back or a half degree makes a difference. It makes quite a difference.
So
you can just totally fine tune.
Front foot pressure meaning that you're just going to generate a bit more, like it'll just lift a bit more, in essence.
It's more to do with balance than lift. I mean, the foil's creating the lift, and it's still creating the same lift, but it's more to do with the balance on there. Like, you want a balance between your feet, and you need to have a little bit of front foot pressure just to balance on there. So having more angle on the rear will give you more front foot pressure. Often, for example, when you hop on one of the skinny rears, there's not much to them, and they work at the upper limit. So when you're getting up to speed, they're very squirrely and loose to use. But when you're going really fast, they're solid and secure, and they feel really good. So when you're first riding a skinny rear, I often tell people to put some positive shim in there, say a 1 degree shim in the rear, and it makes that rear wing more active. It gives it more downward force, which creates more front foot pressure. And that helps people used to it. Chances are 1, 2, 3 days, you'll take it out and you won't need it. But it definitely gives you a little bit of front foot pressure to make it comfortable when you're getting used to something that's a lot less.
Mm-hmm. It's a bit squirrelier. Huh.
Yep.
Anything exciting coming out, I guess, for 2024 beyond? Can you share anything that's in the works?
We try and keep things secret, but we're not very good at it, obviously. But we're working on lots of things. We're working on some bigger wings for dock start, and for like getting into the super light downwind. One of the biggest problems with downwinding is actually getting up on the foil, and having a bigger wing that lifts in just about nothing, and being able to ride micro bumps that are not really possible now. That's kind of a dream, and something we've been working on for a while. Lot of stuff to do there.
How's that journey coming? Because that's pretty popular now.
Yeah, well, we're getting pretty close. It's not as easy as you might think. We've found big wings actually quite difficult to make, and the 1201's a good example. We did 4 or 5 different versions of that, and quite a few of them were terrible. They were really, really bad. And we finally got the 1201 right, and it is really, really good. It's quite balanced. It's quite easy to use. It actually turns pretty good. And, we've released that, and that's been a great wing out there. But it wasn't easy. Some of the smaller wings are very, very easy to put into production. And we immediately tried doing a bigger version of the 1201, and it was particularly bad. It was a terrible wing. So you learn a lot from your failures, though. So it was a very interesting process. And, yeah, we've got some really good stuff happening in that now.
Do you know what?
One of the challenges for what was wrong with it?
Yeah, and what makes it challenging to build something bigger? Is it? Yeah, just curious.
There's 2 things with bigger wings. The leverage is greater, so it puts more of a demand on your mast. I've always said, like, when you're foiling, you're basically riding the front wing. That's what you're riding. So the front wing needs to be really, really well attached to your fuselage. And the way that we do the red fuselage and the black fuselage, it's quite wide. And when it bolts into the wing, it stops it from rolling side to side. So it gives you a really solid connection to the wing. That's important. The join from the fuselage to the mast is really important. And the stiffness of the mast is really important, the stiffness of the base plate. All of that's really critical. If you've got any wobble or lack of connection in there, then you kind of can't really ride your front wing efficiently because it's just all over the show doing its thing, and you're trying to balance on top of it. And it's very, very difficult.
Fair enough.
So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stiffer the joins as possible. One of the beauty of the red and black fuselage, the way it's just screwed on with 4 screws, is the tension of those screws is what holds it really tight onto that wide surface. And you can have a wing and fuselage that's a year old, 2 years old. When you put it back on each time, you still torque the screws up to the same tension, so it fits just as well as it did the first time when it was out of the box. You're not relying on some taper fit to be perfect and not round off. It actually fits really well.
That makes sense.
And that's an important thing. So when you're getting into the bigger wings, it's very important that you've got a super stiff mast, and probably a good chance to talk about masts. Before I get into that, I'll just, you asked about what went wrong with that, the bigger 1201. And part of what we were doing is we made the wing a lot bigger. It was a scaled up version of it, but we were very worried with the loading and holding that wing together so it didn't just snap. So we ended up thickening the wing through the middle of it. And what we ended up doing is we ended up messing up the elliptical load distribution. So you really want the loading of the wing to be most at the fuselage and then come out in a perfect elliptical load from there. And that one was actually loaded further out, so it actually came like this, the curve, and then came down. So the peak lift of the wing was actually this far out from the fuselage on both sides. So it was a little bit like a catamaran, and you had both sides fighting against each other. And it was near impossible to actually control it and drive it and steer it. So it was a great lesson for us, and we learned a lot from it. So it was really good to do that.
Mm-hmm. Masts.
Back to masts and the mast stiffness. Stiffness is absolutely critical in my opinion, and in my opinion, it's a far more important question than the weight of a mast. Our original carbon mast that we did, we were trying to fit into the expectation of the market to have a mast that was 1.5 kilograms in weight, and you do that by having less carbon in it. And if you've got less carbon in it, it is not as stiff. And if it's not as stiff, you don't get as good a connection to that front wing. And on a more high aspect wing, it makes quite a big difference. It's the wing gets all skittery and difficult to control unless you've got a really strong connection. So we had our aluminium mast, which is really, really stiff. It's a great mast, but it's an extrusion, so it's the same thickness top to bottom. So it means that you're carrying 19 millimeters down at the fuselage where you're cutting the water, and it's a big, fat chunk of mast. So when you're pushing it hard at an angle of attack, it does tend to release, and you do get a sheet water release off that mast because it is, it's great for dock start, great for pump. It's stiff, it's cheap, great for learning. But when you're pushing the extremes on it, it's not going to handle super high speed. Stiff, but it's just too fat to cut quickly. Our power carbon mast it's got a taper in it, so it's around 15 millimeters at the bottom, and up the top, even 100 mils down from the base plate, it's about 20 mils thick. And that tapered thickness, the way that the mast bolts on, it's sort of like a cantilever, and the most load is right at the base plate, the bottom end of the mast. So you need to have it quite fat and thick there to give you a solid control and thickness. But down the bottom, it can afford to be a bit narrower. So we did that, and the power carbon mast comes in power carbon, which is normal carbon, and then we do a whole modulus version, which is a lot stiffer again. And the aluminium mast It's kind of a benchmark for a lot of things. There was a recent test that some company did. It was independent to us, and they tested most of the carbon masts on the market, and they also tested the 19 mil aluminium mast, and that actually tested as the stiffest mast of all the masts they tested. So it was actually stiffer than all of the carbon masts they tested. I know that our power carbon mast, using the exact same method of testing that they were testing with, is 25% stiffer than the aluminium, and our power carbon high modulus is 35% stiffer. The mast that, like, when we came out with the power carbon mast, we kept going with it, and we've developed masts that are way stiffer again. And like the mast that I'm riding myself at the moment, it's 55% stiffer than the 19 mil aluminium as a benchmark for stiffness. And it just feels fantastic. The control you get from that is totally amazing. And it's one of those things that's very difficult to step back down. When you get used to that stiffer mast, it just feels great. And you don't really want to go back to less stiff than that. It's no lighter. It's not a lighter mast or anything. It's just stiffer. And even when we were at the gorge, we had the twins there, and they're 60 kg. They're quite light kids. When they were going for dock start or pump, paddle up pump or whatever they were testing, they always chose those special masts that were ridiculously stiff. That was their choice. So I don't think it relates so much to lightweight, heavyweight. I just think a stiffer mast just gives you that much better connection to your whole foil thing. As long as it's not too fat. You're not going to go fast racing with a really, really thick mast.
So then you're not looking to generate any whip or anything from your mast. You're looking to be able to ride the foil as though it was intended to be ridden, and then the stiffer it is allows you, it's almost like a race car that has tighter suspension. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, well, you're basically getting your lift, your drive, everything's coming from that front wing. So you need to be as rigidly connected to that as you possibly can. So that relates back to the joint of the fuselage, the joint of the mast, and the stiffness of the mast overall, and the base plate, and even the way it bolts onto the board. It's all got to be stiff. Anything that's losing energy in that makes a big difference.
Okay, fair enough. And what's your favorite? Go ahead.
We even did a dock start prototype board we were testing the other day, and it's a lot stiffer in torsion and everything. And everyone noted when they were riding that the control of the wing was that much better just from a stiffer board. So, stiffness, I think, is critical through every part of your whole entire setup and all the joints between your whole entire setup, top to bottom.
And that's something more new, right? Coming?
It's another thing that we're working on. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Huh. What's your favorite setup of your own gear that you love to ride?
Mainly what I do is winging, and in my local conditions here, and light or moderate winds, I use the Art Pro 1051, and I use it with an ultra short advanced fuselage, and I use a 362 by 50 skinny. I use one of my own fancy masts. And that's my kind of favourite setup for most of the conditions I go out in. If it's a bit wild or there's more surf for surfing, I'll go out on a 900 or an 840 Spitfire, but I'd leave everything else just the same. And that does me. So, I don't need too much gear.
Even though you have access to all of it.
Yeah.
That's cool. How was your first foil ride like? Like, what did that make you feel like?
It's kind of a magic feeling. Like, if you think back to learning to foil, I think right back to the beginning when I was sailing a small yacht when I was a kid, and it was bang, 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 and then learning to surf, and you're always looking for a glassy day so that it's smooth and not bang, 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 bang. And then windsurfing, I mean, that was absolutely pounding on your knees. It thrashes you. And kite surfing, same, absolutely thrashing, bang, 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 bang. And then all of a sudden foiling, it's just smooth. You get up and there's just, just
Yeah.
going along. It's a magic feeling, and it takes a little bit to get over that.
Yeah. How are the
Not
whereabouts are
sure that
you
you
in
ever
New
get
Zealand?
totally over that.
No,
I'm
I don't
just
think so. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. I'm just north of Auckland, and we're in a peninsula that sticks out. It's called Wangapara Peninsula, and we've got beaches facing every which way. So it means whichever way the wind's coming from, we can find a good beach. And my local beach is just down in front of me here, and it's actually coming out windy today.
Oh, I'll come down.
It's only about 200 meters away, and we sometimes get some small waves in there. Mostly it's fairly flat. Um, and if I drive north from here, we've got Mangawai Heads, which is a really good surf spot and good for winging with a bit of wind on it as well. It's a pretty good spot for testing. We've got a really nice crew here as well to ride with. So a lot of young kids. There's a friend of mine from the windsurfing days, Barbara Kendall. She lives just around the corner, and she's been instrumental in teaching all of the local kids to get into it. And the level of the kids is just amazing, and there's
Isn't it
just so
crazy
many of
now?
them now.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's really good to see them whipping around doing their thing.
Oh yeah, it
Yeah.
must be pretty fun. Yeah. So who's riding for Axis right now? What pro riders are riding for you if you know some off the top, and then how are they doing? Obviously they're on tour and different things.
So I guess we seem to have been doing very well on the downwinding stuff lately. And Edo is by far our fastest rider in the men, and Olivia in the women. And Edo had a really good race season in Hawaii this year. His first race was the M2M. And he was actually doing really well in that. He didn't really have it planned out where he was going, and he saw everyone turning off to the finish, and he was like, oh, and sort of came in there. But, potentially he could have actually won that race. He was really fast, but he didn't have it sorted to where he was going. And then the next race after that was the Paddle Imua race in Maui. Basically a Maliko run that finishes in Kanaha. And that race was capped, and there was no more entries available. So he couldn't officially enter that, but he went in the race anyway, waited for everyone to start, did his own thing, cut through everybody, and he won that race by a long shot. And he was the fastest in that. And then the M2O, he could have done brilliantly in that, but he had slightly too small a foil for the conditions, and it's partly also to do with that race. It's about 10 minutes to get out to the bumps and the wind. It's a crazy idea. And then at the finish, you've got to go around Diamond Head, and you've got half an hour, most of the time, lying on top of your board, paddling into the wind. It doesn't really make sense for a downwind race to do that. But he had a particularly terrible start. He started well, and he was doing really well, but he just couldn't maintain the pumping to get out to the bumps. And he came down off his board, and the whole world went past him. And worse than that, all of their boats, so he had at least 50 boats, went past, chopping the water up. So it was just an impossible mess. You couldn't even climb back on the board. It was that rough from all the boats. And he kept trying and falling and trying and falling. And he actually had 13 minutes in the water doing nothing. So he gave the lead guys 13 minutes head start, and right on the corner at China Walls, he was about 50 feet behind the leader. So he was 13 minutes faster than them across the channel, which is quite something.
Oh boy!
Olivia won that race in the women's, but she also had her challenges as well, getting around the corner and just the tricky conditions of that race.
Fair enough.
The next race that we've got coming up is there's a downwind race in France. So it's in October, end of October, and Olivia's going in it, Edo's going in it, and Olivia's assured me that it's a proper race this time with a proper start and proper bumps all the way start to finish. So it'll be more of a fair race as to who does what, and be really interested to see how everyone goes in that. We had a bunch of riders in the M2O. I think there's 11 riders riding Axis, and they all did pretty well. Kai Lenny chose to ride our stuff. He's not officially an Axis rider. Kai rides whatever he wants to ride, and he liked our gear better than anyone else's and chose to ride it in the M20, which is pretty cool.
Oh yeah, no, because I've had a couple schools on the podcast, and both of them are running Axis, and they just love your customer support, and then they just love the gear. So there's a school in Greece, and then also,
yep.
And then obviously the school in La Ventana, with Endo. So he's running your stuff. But
he's a great guy. I met him for the first time at AWSI. It was great to hang with him.
Oh yeah, no, he's an awesome. Yeah, he's a fun guy. But even the ones that were in Greece, Reckless Riders, they loved your stuff. They just said he had tested out so many different kinds of foils and so many boards and so many everything, and he just swore by your system. So I just wanted to talk to you a bit more to learn more about the system, because it's a bit more unique, I guess. And there's so many options. And then that's what a lot of people, my buddies back in Auto, they're riding Axis as well. So, or some of them are.
Yeah. So there's a local school just down the road from us here, Alan McIntosh. It's called Mad Loop, and it used to be a windsurf school. Still does windsurf school as well, but he mostly does wing foil instruction now. And right from day one, we worked with him developing the learner gear, and a lot of the feedback from him has been really, really good for developing what we've developed now. And as you say, I think the gear is, we have gear from the very beginner all the way to the very most experienced rider. We have a lot of full-on prone riders that are team riders as well, based all around the world, and lots of downwind riders and wingers. And, we have, as we develop new gear, not the beginner gear, but more of the upper range, every time we develop a new wing, we look at our range of riders and kind of go, yep, he'd be good. And it depends on what they do, their conditions and their size and whatever. So we'll send it off to all of them and get feedback from them.
Okay.
The very best feedback that I trust the most is from myself. But sadly, where it seems to be going with the super small, high aspect fast wings, it's moved a bit beyond what I'm comfortable riding anymore. So It is good to ride and test myself as much as possible. But we're having to rely more and more on, key team riders that we work closely with that I want to take it to another place to what we're doing now.
Well, yeah, they're so young and throwing so many tricks now. It's absolutely insane. But okay, so you're still primary testing then, because you have all that years of experience to see what you want to do. Like, are you drawing a lot of this stuff in the computer? Is it using a lot of software to come up with what you're looking to achieve, or is it more just?
We do use that a lot, and I guess probably about 3 years ago, the guy I designed, Kevin, that I designed a lot of the foils with, he ran simulation on a lot of the wings we had already. It was the HPS, the ART, some BSC wings, and it gives a lot of information and a lot of different graphs. But one of the graphs was basically a lift to speed graph, and it sort of shows for a given weight, you can test all of the wings on the same weight of rider. This is just the front wing alone, and it plotted all these graphs, and I could see that, you can see where a wing starts, where it actually takes off, and then where the drag actually drops down to its most efficient, so where it's fastest, and then the drag sort of comes back up again. So it's like this sort of shaped curve. And then some of the ART wings, they get up on the foil, but then the drag drops down very dramatically, and then you get a flat bottom, and then it comes up again. So you could tell by the characteristic of the graph. Like, I looked at all the graphs and kind of went, that's great. I could have told you that. It was really good looking back on it. It was completely obvious that, that I agree with all of that. So we started using that going forward from the skinning that we did 2 years ago, and we've used it ever since. And it's a really good baseline to get an idea of what a wing is going to be like. That particular type of simulation is relatively straightforward, and it doesn't take a huge amount of processing time to do. but it just tells you what that foil, where it takes off and how it works. It doesn't tell you the characteristics of how it will turn. What happens when you pop a tip out? It doesn't tell you a lot of things. It just gives you a bit of an idea, and that's been really useful for going forward. And going forward from here, we've been working with another friend here, and he's got it's full-on software, like it's $250,000 worth of software, and it's the same one that 4 of the America's Cup campaigns are using, and it is very, very good for analysing stuff, but it actually does the whole thing as an assembly. So, you can, the front wing, the fuselage, the back wing, the mast, and, how much mast you put in, and you can do a preset course and carve a course, and you can pop a tip out or not, and so it goes through a whole range of stuff that the amount of information it gives you is mind-boggling, and how to interpret that and everything is kind of a whole nother story. I do think that that's probably where it's going, and I think that's where we're going to get some of our biggest gains in the future. But it's actually learning to interpret the feedback that you're getting from that sort of information. It doesn't exactly tell you this is what you need to do. It tells you a bunch of stuff, and you have to work out, well, what does that all mean. So
okay,
yeah.
So it just
at the moment we do some analysis, and we also build things and test them out ourselves. Building and testing them is also a bit of a problem too, because of the way that the wings are. Now, you can't necessarily build a prototype wing, because it has to be in the construction that you're actually building in to get the flex characteristics and the feel of it. So, you want to get pretty close, because the mold that you're building is a CNC cut tooling steel mold. Kind of expensive to build, and you don't want to be building hundreds of those just on a whim that maybe this will work. You need to have a fairly good idea that you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, so you have to build obviously molds for every single different thing that you have, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And now can molds be changed, modified, or are they kind of just?
We are, as we go forward, we're trying to build them slightly oversized. I mean, they tried to build the molds as small as they could, just so they could physically lift them. Because, I mean, some of these molds, they're massively heavy, and they have like a scissor lift table that lifts it up, and then once it's all packed with all of the fibers, and then it actually gets slid into a heat press, and to be able to maneuver that huge chunk of metal, you don't want to have it massive. So we've been building those slightly bigger than they want to build them, so that we can get a second or third go at recutting them. But it is a mission. That brings up the idea of the how's that wing made. So going back to the 840 there, on the outside you can see the weave, and it's a woven carbon on the outside, and that's just a 200 gram pre-preg carbon, and that is CNC. It's like a blade cut on the table, but then inside of this is all the actual layup, and the layup is made of pre-preg unicarbons, and some of them are laid this way, some of them are laid 45 degrees, all different layups, and that affects the flex and feel and strength of the wing. So same applies for the mast. I think the mast has got about 60 layers of carbon in it, and it has the woven carbon on the outside, and then the internal is all pre-preg carbon, there is a core, not much core, because there's not much room for a core in the mast, but there is some core there as well. Same with the wings.
Okay. So then, is there anything else that you'd want to cover and tell people about your cool Axis company? And by the way, I met your designer of your shirt there, and super nice guy. And it was awesome to talk
Richie.
To him about how he worked on just the whole branding aspect of that logo. I really like it. It's a pretty cool logo.
So he's a mate from the early days of windsurfing, and I remember going in a windsurfing competition when I was 21, and he beat me way back then. Never got over it.
No, fair
But
enough.
he came on board, I guess, a couple of years ago, and he's done all of the, the graphics for the bags and the new screw boxes and a lot of stuff that's been, a lot of new stuff to work on, and he's really put it all together amazingly, and all of the parts look like they're supposed to be together now. So he does a great job of that.
Yeah, no, it was how I think it was his knee he just had? Was he having surgery or something?
Yeah, it's not good. It's not
Yeah, that
good.
was too bad.
Yeah,
Yeah, hopefully he
yeah,
heals up and he gets that. But yeah,
yeah. Well, he hasn't had the surgery yet. He's still
okay,
waiting to get that done. So that'll
okay,
be a little ways off.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So if anybody's looking to get into foiling, and what else do you think they would need to know about Axis that would make it their kind of go-to?
Uh, I think there's obviously a lot of information on accessfoils.com. We also have a Facebook group that's nothing to do with us. It's not actually our group, and it's called Access Foil Riders, and that's just anyone that wants to be on there. And they're a really supportive community, and that's been quite amazing to watch that develop. And people go on there and ask a question. Just changing over to Access, and I've been writing this, and this, and how does that relate to the Access range, and what would I like, and what would work for what I'm trying to do. And there's a bunch of people come on there and give really useful, helpful feedback, and it's been amazing to watch and see how well that works. Yeah, very proud of that community on there and how they support everyone else. It's great to see.
It's pretty cool with that stuff, eh? Hey, I had a technical question actually.
Yeah.
Do you know how the Armstrong fuse goes through? So they have their mass and it's a hole and it goes through, and then there's bolt-on ones. So do you know what obviously they're using titanium core, and then on the one that I have, and it just kind of snaps through that center. Is there an advantage to doing that versus just doing bolt-on?
Like I said with the bolt-on before, you can have it 1 year, 2 years old, and each time you bolt it together, the connection is just as good as the day it was first put together.
Okay.
With a lot of those taper fit, there's a few companies do like a taper fit. One piece goes into a hole, and the idea is that they fit perfectly and make a really good join. But over time, that can wear. It's carbon on carbon, and it doesn't provide the support it does when it was brand new. So I prefer to have a fit that goes together and is held together by bolts.
Okay.
The bolts don't actually, like if you look at our mast join to the fuselage join, for example, the bolts are there to hold it together, but they don't actually take much load. The load is actually held by the bit that fits into the fuselage. That actually takes the load.
Okay. And thoughts on
the bolts just stop it from falling off.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. And thoughts about monoblocks that are coming that are already preset? You just pick it and go?
It's a way of doing it, but the problem with that is that it's not so versatile. So, for example, with the Axis setup, the front wing comes off the fuselage, and you can just stick another wing on there. So, if you have a system where the front wing has a fuselage or portion of the fuselage, every time you buy that wing, you have to buy that fuselage with it as well. And we also have fuselage where the mast is further forward, advanced fuselage, and where the fuselage is further, the mast is mounted further back in the fuselage. It makes a big difference depending on what you want to do. So you lose the ability to have that adjustability.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. That's a good point. Huh.
I think most of the stuff we do is there for a reason. It's not just for, try to think it out, and we try to make it so that it is as modular as possible and does go forward, and you can build whatever you possibly want to ride out of all the bits.
Okay, fair enough. So are you going to get out for maybe a quick little session this afternoon, or?
No, I can't.
Your ear.
I've had a chunk cut out of my ear, and I've got the stitches coming out in a couple of days. So
fair enough. You're going to rest
until then.
Yeah. Nice. So what are you going to work on then this afternoon?
I'm going to do some emails.
Hey.
Organise a few things. I'm actually organising for that event in France too. I've got to send a bunch of stuff to various riders over there, getting ready for that.
Okay.
I'm actually leaving on Friday for a family holiday in Indonesia. So I've got 2
cool.
weeks exploring around there. Then I'm flying to China to pick up some stuff and see the factories, and then flying to France for the event for a week or so, and then coming back to Indonesia for a week, then back to New Zealand for 2 weeks, and then we've got the Marimbula Classic in Australia, which looking forward to. That should be a great event. So,
nice. How has that been to be able to see so many of the different spots around the world with your own company? How does that make you feel?
Oh, I love it. I love it. No, I've met a lot of people over the years traveling, and I really enjoy the privilege of being able to do that. And I feel like I've got a lot of good friends that, I maybe only spend a week or so here and there, but they're friends all around the world, and it's great to be able to do that.
It's a pretty cool community, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. How do you find the different companies working together? Are they fairly friendly? I guess obviously there's some stuff you have to hold secret, but how's working in there?
We just do our own thing.
Okay.
We don't really have much to do with any other companies. We just do our own thing and design our own thing and test with our riders and just focus on that.
Yeah, that's what Keith from KT was saying as well for board design. He said, we just focus on our own, and everybody should, they just focus on their own stuff, and it's all unique and good in their own right. So,
yep.
Yeah.
They do really nice boards. I was looking at one of Kai's downwind boards that he had done, and it looked really sensible. I like the shape and the theory and the ideas that he put into it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Have you tried downwinding?
No, I've had a heart condition for the past 5 years, and atrial fibrillation, and it tipped me into, like, when I went sup paddling, my heart rate went up over 200 beats a minute, and then it would drop down to 40 and back up over 200, 220 even times. It just feels like your heart's coming completely out of you, and every time it went out of sync like that, I'd have to go to hospital, and they put an electric pad on both sides of you, put you to sleep, and give you a huge shock and knock you back into sync again. And I basically had to avoid, the extreme, like downwind paddling. There's no way I could even think about it.
Okay.
But they've actually done all repairs on that now. I've had the operation to fix it. It's been a year almost now, and it seems to be pretty good. So,
nice. Glad
I'd like
to hear.
To try and start getting into that. I'd like to try and learn to dock start this summer, but we'll see how that goes.
If you do that, you send us over some videos.
Will do. Yeah. We've got, just at the local beach, and the next one, we have a floating pontoon that goes in for the whole summer. And it's really good for learning to dock start. So
I want to try that.
Got good setups here locally.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
It's really, that's really getting huge. Some of the, look in Switzerland, they're selling a lot of the Swiss ski teams are using it for cross training. And it's just getting massive. And I also think what could come out of that is quite amazing as well. Just watching some of the more recent developments we've had with that and seeing what they can do. It's an exciting space to watch.
Yeah, it's been completely brand new boards. They're skinny, tough to get started, and then the pros make it look easy. But for us mere mortals, it's going to be a tough venture, but it's going to be fun.
It was kind of interesting to see all of our team at the gorge, because most of them for downwinding use the Art Pros, but the gorge is kind of a very special sort of a wave that's quite slow, and they ended up using the Spitfires. And Edo, he was doing downwinders on the 720 Spitfire, 12-mile downwinders on a tiny, tiny little Spitfire.
Oh, wow. I guess they're getting a lot of lift there because of the current, right?
Well, there was quite a big swell, but he was more focused on tearing it apart. Like the videos of him, he was fully surfing. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Well, hey, Adrian, thanks a lot for having a chat with me today. It was pretty cool to see you again and catch up. Absolutely. Let me know when you got some newer stuff coming out. Let us know. Happy to have you back on. We can share that with everybody, and safe flight, because you're going on your family vacation soon. So safe flight. Hope you get some downtime. Yeah, it was absolutely awesome.
For that.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Cool. Well, hey,
See you
thanks
again.
everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time.